G'day, I'm Keith Tonkin, Managing Director of Aviation Projects based in Brisbane, Australia. Aviation Projects is a trusted advisor to regional airports and we specialise in aerodrome safeguarding. So I hope to inspire you today to understand and protect your aerodrome's operational airspace. First though, I'd like to very sincerely thank Aviassist for the privilege of being able to present to you today, all the way from Australia. Unfortunately, we couldn't be there in person, but virtually is just as good. A little bit about me. My background is flying aeroplanes. I started out flying Caraboos, the transport aircraft, and then F-111s in Australia's Air Force, and then flew for Qantas internationally and domestically. And I have flown a couple of other different types of aeroplanes for fun. Now, operational airspace is the airspace that aeroplanes need to have to be able to fly around safely. Visually, we use obstacle limitation surfaces, or OLS, and for instrument flight, we use PANSOP surfaces to protect the airspace that we need for aircraft to fly in cloud, or when they can't have visual reference of the ground or water. These surfaces have different dimensions and characteristics, and they're specified in documents like ICAO's Annex 14 and different state regulations and standards. So why do we need operational airspace? Well, I've got a couple of really good examples here. I was involved in one of these accidents, the one on my left, where we landed a Caribou on an aerodrome that had trees very close to the runway, and unfortunately they were so close that we trimmed a few with our wing. That was a bit embarrassing. The other one is an example where a Ferris wheel was placed near the end of a runway and an aircraft had a problem during a go-around and unfortunately impacted the Ferris wheel. Some other things that you might want to consider are to ensure that the airspace is safe for pilots when they're flying is the fact that while things are going well, it's probably not that important, but when we have things like wind shear or turbulence, or we've got a trainee pilot learning how to fly an aeroplane, or for some reason we have a malfunction or an engine failure, we want things to be in our favour, and that's when we need to protect ourselves from obstacles. Now, one of the other more important things to remember is that operational airspace is a lot bigger than you think. You can see in the drawing here that the obstacle limitation surfaces extend to up to 15,000 metres or 15 kilometres from an aerodrome, and for the PANSOPs procedures, they extend out to 30 nautical miles or 55.6 kilometres. That's a long way, and often we find that people don't think about, oh, I'm a really long way from the airport, so it probably doesn't matter. Well, it actually does. The other thing I really want you to remember is that AGL, or above ground level, does not equal above mean sea level, or AMSL, particularly where you have terrain or mountains in the way. Something else to think about is if you're changing something about your aerodrome or building a brand new one, is that changing the aircraft type or the scope of operations can have an impact on the operational airspace. If you're flying a Cessna 208, it probably doesn't need as much airspace as a jumbo jet. And also, if you have something where, for example, trees are growing too tall over time, then the runway might need to be reduced in length, as you can see on the right-hand side there. Or if for some reason you're making the runway longer, the obstacle limitation surface extend out commensurate with those changes to the inputs. So protecting your airspace is really important. You need to understand the size and shape of your obstacle limitation surfaces and how the PANSOP surfaces protect and defend against obstacle penetration. You need to make sure you monitor and review your procedures and your obstacle limitation surfaces on a regular basis. And as you can see, some examples, we have instrument survey of the obstacles with a trained surveyor. It could be just during day-to-day operations so that you keep an eye out for things like cranes or other obstacles penetrating your airspace. You might use a drone to do it. And the main thing is that you regularly update your information. Make sure that where people are applying to build something in or near your airport, they apply through a process that understands your airspace. And you need to make sure from a day-to-day operations perspective, if someone wants to operate a crane or put something up on a short-term basis, that you have a process for them to be able to do that. Now, one of the things I really want you to remember is that we're looking after the pilots here so that they can have a safe operating environment to fly around in. But also we want to maximise payload and range of our aircraft operations, and obstacles can affect that in lots of different ways. So that also applies to dispatchers, it applies to performance engineers. There are lots of parts of the industry that need to understand about obstacles. And we can do that by making sure we know where they are and how they affect our airspace. we need to make sure we communicate that widely, and that can be done through NOTAMs, for example. And you can see one here where there's a NOTAM saying some obstacles can be deleted from some of the aeronautical data. You can also see we have an example of a comms tower that has red and white markings on it so that the pilots can see it. There's another example, NOTAM, where the runways that were displaced in the example previously provided some information to the pilots through a NOTAM. And you can also see an aeronautical data publication, which is an instrument approach procedure chart for Johannesburg Airport, which shows all sorts of information about the obstacle environment. So to wrap up then, today we've talked about operational airspace and why it's so important for safe and efficient aircraft operations. We've talked about the fact that obstacle limitation surfaces are for visual flight and extend to 15 kilometres from an airport, and PANSOP surfaces are for instrument flight and extend to 55.6 kilometres from an airport. We've looked at some of the things that can go wrong. We've looked at how you can make sure that you check for obstacles through visual and inspections and ongoing reviewing. We've talked about how you can make sure the information is communicated widely to the aviation community so that they can make good decisions. And so the three things I want to take away today are: 1, know before you go, make sure the information is available to everyone who needs to know it. Secondly, we want to make sure that you establish your current and future operational airspace and make sure it is communicated widely. And finally, make sure you check it regularly and defend it rigorously. Thanks so much for having me at your conference today. We really appreciate the opportunity to participate in this amazing conference. I look forward to seeing everyone again soon. See you later.